If you click on the Design button at the bottom of the window, you can view the web page in the Designer. Visual Studio 2005 provides the familiar drag and drop concept for building user interfaces. You can use the toolbox on the left-hand side to drag components or controls from the toolbox onto your web page. Now I'm just going to click on the pin symbol here to pin the toolbox onto my environment desktop so that it doesn't disappear in a flash. If I close some of the items here, you can see there are various different types of control available to us. We're going to have a look at this in more detail in the next lesson. So let me just close those back up again. For now, we'll use some of the standard controls here. So for example, labels, text boxes, and buttons. Let's drag some controls onto the web page. Start with a label and drag it onto the web page. I'll put it just there. Then we'll add a text box and I'll put it just there. Then we'll add a button. So let's just put that there. And finally, let's go for another label and I'm going to put that there. Now, if you're familiar with creating Windows applications, you might expect to be able to drag and drop the user interface components anywhere you like on the page. But you can't do this with ASP.NET by default. So for example, if I try to move the button to lower in the page, I can't. It doesn't let me do it. It organizes the controls in a flow layout from left to right and from top to bottom. The reason for this is to avoid browser incompatibilities when it comes to absolute positioning for controls. The standard workaround, if you do want to control the user interface layout, is to put your controls into HTML tables, and this is what we're going to do later on. For now, we'll leave it as it is, and we'll just set some of the properties for our controls. When you select a control, you can use the Properties window to set properties on that control. So let's select the label. To view the properties for a control, you right-click the control and select Properties, and the Properties window appears in the bottom left-hand corner. You can view the properties alphabetically or by category. In my display, currently, they're displayed alphabetically. If I want to view them by category, I can click on this icon here, and it will then display the properties according to their category. Okay, so choose whichever you prefer. Personally speaking, I prefer to view properties alphabetically because I can never remember which category they're in. So I'll just click on the alphabetical viewer. The first property we need to set is the ID property. This is the programmatic variable name for the ID control. So let's set the ID to a meaningful name, such as full name label. I'm also going to set the text property, so let me scroll down a little bit lower. The text property is what the label actually displays on the screen. So let's change that to full name and a colon at the end. And I'll press enter. And as you can see in the designer, it's changed the label to full name. Now let's set some properties on the text box. So let's select the text box, come back down to the properties window down here. The only property I'm going to set for the text box is the ID, and I'm going to set it to full name text box. There we go. Next up, let's change the properties for the button. So we'll set the ID for the button to be submit button. Press enter. And let's also set the text property button to click me, and as you can see, that's what gets displayed in the button. Finally, we have this last label here. This label is going to display information dynamically generated by the website. So let's set the name or the ID to be result label. And what we'll also do is change some of the graphical user interface aspects of the label. Let's give it a different color and a different font. So we'll set the background color, the back color property. You can choose from one of the colors in the palette, or if you prefer, you can click on the web tab and we'll go for a background color of light grey, I would suggest. And then if we scroll down a bit further, let's set the font property. You can choose whether it's going to be in bold, let's say bold, and whether it's in italics, let's have italics as well. And you can also choose a font name for the control. So let's choose the font to be Arial. And one more thing, let's set the font size to be slightly bigger. So let's choose large as our font size. There we go. So that's the properties for the label. Just finally, I'm going to remove the previous text for the label and replace it with something a little bit more meaningful at this stage. The result will be displayed here. So let's see what that looks like in terms of HTML markup. If we click on the source link at the bottom of our designer page, you can see Visual Studio has added various controls, HTML markup, to our web page. So we have an ASP label, and the label specifies the ID that we gave. Run at server, again I'll explain what that means later. That's the text property that we set for the label. Also we have the text box element. It contains the ID that we specified. It also contains a run at server attribute, and that's just a non-breaking space for the text box. That's the empty content for the text box. Then we have the label, and the label contains result label as an ID, and it has a background color that we specified and various other properties such as bold, italic and font choice. Just one other thing, if I press enter at that point, you can see there's a button here. The button will be clicked by the user and will cause a postback to the ASP.NET web page running on the server. Just one other thing, what we can do at this point is to tidy up the user interface slightly. If I go to the end of the label tag, I'm going to add a line break, angle bracket, BR, close angle bracket. And let's add a line break after the text box. And let's add a line break after the button. So it's perfectly reasonable for you to edit the content of this page. And in fact, Visual Studio keeps the source view and the design view synchronized. So if I click back on the design view, you can see that it's inserted the line breaks at the points where I specified.